Good morning and Baraka de Salah. I'm Ayo Makinde.
Well, the fast is over. It's been 30 days. And, well, from all of us, happy Eid al-Fitr. I know it's been a challenging month, and we're glad that it is. I mean, it's something that has been done. And the blessings, of course, are meant to follow afterwards.
Oh, certainly. Well, we really are expecting that blessing. And just as you said, that the blessing, the values of the month, not only for the people who are involved, but everyone that will also interface. We should help ourselves to be better. Good morning, Markwe.
Good morning, gentlemen, and Baraka de Salah to all our viewers. Happy holidays to you. Quite a number of things to celebrate. Yesterday was Workers' Day, and today is the Eid. So certainly a lot of things to celebrate. Happy holidays to us all.
Sharing that, that is happening, and we celebrate with everyone. It just so happens, as Markwe has often said once in a while on this program, that we just have to do the things that we have to do, bring all of the issues that are coming. While we're talking about Workers' Day, I mean, a number of issues on the front pages, and of course, things that have happened yesterday, comments by many of our leaders. We still received this news late last night of a building collapse in Lagos. Most certainly a very, very troubling and disturbing one, coming at a time when we actually should be celebrating and raking in our harvests of blessings. This definitely isn't something that we wanted to wake up to this morning, Carly.
Absolutely. I mean, according to Lasema, this collapse happened around a few minutes to 10. So, I mean, it's been a very long day, Sunday especially. Lots of people either just winding down, trying to prepare for today, by the way, which is a public holiday, and then that happened. According to the reports by Lasema, rescue operations is ongoing, at least as at the last update, and 20 persons had been rescued, a few people injured. But the big question now is about possible casualties, because, I mean, if you see the pictures coming from the site of that collapse, you'll understand just the magnitude of that one. I know when we hear or see collapses like this, questions will always come up, questions about the integrity of buildings, the emergency procedures, but look at that, the devastation. It is a really, really sad one, honestly, and we'll definitely be getting updates from Lasema, but imagine the panic, the pandemonium, the fear, the sorrow. You can just have a glimpse, really, of what played out in the aftermath of that particular collapse. Clearly not the first this year. We're still trying to get closure to previous collapses we have seen in Lagos. But this one clearly opens up perhaps another book, another chapter in this infamous history of building collapses in Lagos. Marwa.
Well, on my way to work this morning, I happened to be listening to the radio. Sometimes I like solitude, some other times I, tend to listen to the radio, and this particular story did come up. There's a certain program I listen to where they simply do the newspaper review and allow people, share their comments. And someone had a comment on this particular story, and he was relating it to Workers' Day and how it would seem that, our productivity is declining, and how we are a country that imports almost everything, and that in the area of, in the technical area, it would seem that we're doing really poorly, because he was wondering how it is that, a 3-story building, he says it's not even a 20-story building or a 25-story building. A 3-story building cannot even stand, and that, we're so shoddy with everything that we carry out. And that got me thinking, really. I found he's relating that story with Workers' Day and our declining productivity. I found it very interesting that he was able to draw that link. But, thinking about it a little more, it occurred to me that it's not that we don't have the technical know-how. We do know what to do. We know how to build strong story buildings. That knowledge did not simply disappear. It's been with us. It's still with us. It's within our ivory towers. It's within the workspace. What has disappeared is our penchant for honesty, is our penchant for excellence in all that we do. Be it from the people that should be doing the work, or the people who should be oversighting or controlling the people who do the work. Oftentimes, what we're looking out for is profit, sometimes from unscrupulous quarters. So it doesn't matter, who we decide to kill in the process, or how we decide to get the wealth that we're going about. I mean, people die in the process. In many instances, people cannot be bothered. And that's why we will continue to reap this harvest of deaths. Because how do we explain? We're yet to get a history of the building. We don't know when it came up. We do not know if it went down as a result of age. But then you have to ask, how old are the developments in Isaleko, or how old are buildings generally? If the first-story building in Nigeria is still standing, how old is this building that we will say that it is age that has destroyed it? The many questions as to what exactly we're doing to ourselves in terms of, a culture of excellence, a culture of maintenance, a culture to oversight properly. And this is from building control. This is from even the supervisors, the people who own the site, and the people who were put in charge of the workers. Really, a lot of questions to ask here, gentlemen. But I think that we need to take, when we say that building development control needs to be taken more seriously, this is the reason. From what we hear now, we understand that at least 2 lives have been lost. There could be more. It's not yet clear. As you rightly pointed out, Coyote, the story broke late last night. And I believe that as it is a developing story, we will be getting more facts. But this is certainly one too many, and one that should cause us to introspect even more, to ask, if we want profit, at what cost? Is it at the cost of human lives? Is it at the cost of our culture of excellence that we should be striving towards and leaving for generations yet unborn? I do not want to lament today. I think we're still in a very happy mood, and we will not ruin that, with lamentations today. But even as we go about our celebrations, let us take a moment to introspect and ask ourselves, I mean, this is a religious festival. This is a religious celebration. How are we imbibing the things that we profess in our religions, bringing it to our everyday lives? Do we care enough about others to bring it to bear in terms of the work that we do? Over now to you, gentlemen.
A number of times when we've had building collapses, we've heard governments, especially in Lagos, come out and say, well, some buildings have been marked. I remember there was that collapse on Lagos Island. The governor, I think was the governor or some officials of state that went there and said the buildings around this particular one that collapsed have been marked for one thing or the other to conduct integrity tests and all of that. And then there is this one that's just happened now. It is right in a very, very busy area, Ibadan Street at Ebutemeta. Just last week, Wednesday, an expert at the Yaba College of Technology was saying that 95% of building projects in Lagos State do not comply with mandatory soil testing, and therefore they are exposed to the risk of collapse. It was just something that this man said. I mean, he's at the building department in the Yaba College of Technology. He's the director of Applied Research, Technology and Innovation. And one is wondering if this fact is out there, what is being done to ensure that we do not record more loss of lives. I've always contended we have professionals in every area of our lives in governments. Federal, state, even local governments, we have them there. How do we ensure that these things do not happen? That building, yes, Maokwe, you're very, very correct. It's not a new building. It's not one that's just been built. But then it's not as old as the first story building in Lagos, and that one is still standing. So how come this one happened now? So a good number of things, good number of issues to raise. And as we said, still very early days, a developing story. I guess we just have to wait. Let's take a look at the papers this morning.
Well, let's start off with the Guardian newspaper this morning, and it leads with, of course, what today is all about. Or at least yesterday was all about, but the public holiday today is about it. And that's May Day, some call it International Workers' Day. But take a look at what they have. Buhari silent on varsity strike, deregulation as workers boo Igige. Yeah, a couple of riders there. Government hypes regular salary payment as feat. Doesn't sound like the editors are impressed with that one. End ASU strike or will mobilize students to truncate your presidential ambition, Southwest NANS tells Nwajuba. Challenges Osinbajo to match words with action by settling ASU FG face-off within 7 days. Reps Minority Caucus laments workers' fate. And you see TPA-PM urges workers to unite to take over power in 2023. Wonder what TPAP-M is about. Well, more details starts on the front page, continues on page 2. So that's the big story there. And of course, the picture there shows the Vice President, of course, celebrating the International Workers' Day with labor unions across just yesterday. So lots of focus on that one. I'll definitely be breaking it down for you on the program this morning. A couple of other stories you find there. Scrap electricity privatization now. Labour tells government. So yet another angle to the celebration. But this one, Buhari, Osinbajo, Sultan, others for MPSG NC Front Confab May 12. So is this a confab that we've been waiting for, that has been talked about over time? Well, you might want to find out more details on the inside pages. And
it's 20 years. 2004. It's 2004, 2005. Oh. And that was 2014.
And the second leg will be how many of the recommendations have been implemented. There you go. There's this one right at the bottom of the front page. Africans relive horror tales of escape from Ukraine war. Yeah, there's also that one. The war is still on, I should say, and it's been on for too long, I must add. I'll just leave it there for the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Take a look at the front page of the Daily Independent this morning, and what do you find on that front page? Nigerians' weaker purchasing power piles more pressure on economy. Was certainly something referencing Workers' Day as well, and that's the lead of the paper. 2 pictures there, and right underneath those pictures you find May Day. Labour gives conditions for 2023 general elections.
I should mention, actually, on the front page of The Guardian, the other picture shows workers displaying their voter cards at Workers' Day rally. Like, you know, this is a voter card. It can be a red card as well. Okay, so
well, which also speaks to the rider.
To
that story. Says 16 million block votes will go to candidates and parties with bias for workers' welfare. So, red card or employment card,
you know, depending on which. But it will be interesting to really know how Labour plans to do that, because if you look at the breakdown of the registered voters, I mean, they're broken down into different categories. In fact, you see housewives as a category. You see maybe workers, business owners, you know, students and all of that. So it will be interesting to see how Labour can actually muster that 60 million votes.
It will be interesting, because don't forget there is a likelihood that a good number of the people who are members of the NLC are members of political parties.
Exactly.
And so what is Labour asking for? Demands free education, healthcare. So that's the lead of the Daily Independent newspaper this morning. Strike. Above that one, above the nameplate, Osinbajo begs Labour leaders to intervene in ASU FG impasse. Well, that's right there also, right above the nameplate. I wonder what that really means, because I thought Labour had, you know, given some ultimatum of sorts. Okay.
I think at this point, we're just turning to anyone and everyone who can intervene, really. I mean, you've had the Interreligious Council intervening in this impasse. There you go.
That's the Daily Independent this morning, Margaret.
Well, let's bring it more to today, even though there's a bit of yesterday on the front page as well. Salah, final victory against terrorists in sight. That's attributed to the president, Buhari. Lawal, Gbajabiamila governors urge prayers for peace. Atiku, Amechi call for stronger bonds. That is the story you'll find on page 4 of the paper. You look at this one. Can to federal government. Terrorist de-radicalization, rehabilitation, counterproductive. You'll find the story on page 7. This story is also there. Politics always finds a way to creep in, regardless of whether it's Eid or not, or Workers' Day, as the case might be. Zoning. PDP wants court to hands off primary. So you find the story on page 16. Let's remind them that the courts don't invite themselves. People go to the courts. So maybe they should be talking more to their members. You'll find details on page 16 of the paper. And of course, they have a story on Workers' Day, maybe more than a story, because when you look at the pictures, 4 of them in all, if one picture was worth 1,000 words, what will 4 pictures tell you? Workers' Day, federal government urges ASU, others, to embrace dialogue. That story is on page 6. You were talking about workers carrying their voters' card. What do we make of workers carrying umbrellas? I don't know what that was about and where that happened, but it's right on the front page of Daily Trust. Was it sound too much or was it a symbolism? I don't know. You might want to read the details somewhere inside the paper. They have a number of other stories which I'll leave you to do yourself, but let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
Hey, Mapwe, it was a sunny May day. I mean, there's no harm in carrying an umbrella, right? And if the streets are dirty, you can carry a broom and sweep as well.
And if the farmers are there, you can bring pigs.
There you go. So, hey, it depends on, if you like chickens, you can get a rooster. Oh, dear. Well, let's, on a lighter note, I imagine. Well, let's turn our attention to the Nigerian Tribune this morning. This is what you find there. Buhari's ministers, others miss resignation deadlines. Falano, Edom, Ajulo speak on their chances. You know, this had been building up, but looks like it's not happening anyway. So you wonder what that means. Page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune has more details, of course.
Is that to say that the deletion has been done mentally?
Hey, it looks like they're taking the risk anyway. And I think it's something worth looking into because it looks like there's I mean, in this part of the world, there's so much attachment to officers.
Well, there's been a court declaration that has not been set aside. Maybe or maybe not appealed against, but it's not been set aside. So, from what we heard last week from a guest who spoke about it, it stands deleted until reinstated by a court of appeal. So,
but you know how it is with law. But I imagine they've gotten good legal advice. And in fact, the very best, I imagine. So, hey, we'll see how that works out.
Especially because the president didn't make the pronouncement. Like the governors of other states.
Oh yeah, that set it up. And yeah, it's your choice, right? You can choose to or choose not to. Of course, May Day makes its way to the front page. You know, when I see May Day, you know, it connotes yet another thing for me because May Day is Workers' Day, but it's also an expression, May Day. But our 16 million block vote will go to worker-friendly parties. Labour vows to mobilize workers against low-performing governance, calls for general salary review for civil servants. Of course, that's what you find across all the front pages. But see this one, gale of defections, or rather, I take that again, gale of disqualifications as PDP screens aspirants across states. Don't worry, if your heartbeats went faster or you saw gale of defections, you can slow down. It's disqualifications. Pardon me for that one. A host of other stories, but this sad one, yet again in Lagos. 4 die, others injured in third mainland bridge accident. This one is on page 30. There's something on ASU. Party primaries won't hold without resolution of ASU strike. NAMS. So we'll see how they come across with that one. And finally, sports. Ghana's back in Europe. Win at West Ham guarantees continental football. I was going to say, Arsenal didn't leave Europe, I mean, in any way. They've always been in Europe, in England, but you get the context. European football. That's the Nigerian Tribune.
The Leadership newspaper has this one on its front page, and it is, well, as Malquest said, related to today. PMB promises final victory against terrorists, enemies of state. Stories on page 4. says terrorists masquerading under the name of Islam will meet their Waterloo. Khan rejoices with Sultan. Muslims urges peace and unity. Find the details of that right on page 4 of the paper this morning. And a good number of stories you'll find there on the front page, right above the main story. Reps hold emergency plenary on proceeds of crime bill to others on Wednesday. And more details on page 7 of the Leadership newspaper this morning. Malcolm?
Well, I'm looking at New Telegraph for you, and they have this. Workers' Day, Labour demands pay rise for soldiers, police, others. Promises worker-friendly party 16 million block votes. Details are on pages 2, 5, and 28. This is so selfless of Labour, speaking for those who can hardly speak for themselves, but also have a lot of work to do. I mean, we put a big burden on our soldiers and police in recent times. And don't forget that, before now, there's been a threat of strike within the police force. The police authorities have been doing their best to see how they can quell that. But that threat has somewhat lingered over a pay rise promise given freely by the president, but yet to be implemented. Well, they say they're implementing it in phases, so we'll see how that goes. But this is what New Telegraph has on the front page. Workers' Day, Labour demands pay rise for soldiers, police, others. Nigerian workers suffer bare burden of political corruption. That's from ASU. Knocks traditional rulers, religious leaders, Kalu, governors, others laud workers' contribution to national development. Buhari, Lawan, Gbajabia Miller, others absent at May Day celebration. Nigerian workers dependable allies in our electoral reforms. That's according to INEC. That story is also there. PDP challenges application seeking to stop its presidential primary. That story is on page 2 of the paper. And look at this. Salah, war against terrorists posing as Muslims about to end, says Buhari. Orders crackdown on IPOB ESN in Southeast. Approves naval base establishment in Oguta. Assures of adequate funding of security agencies. So that is also on the front page as well. You have some stories on business. Q1 2022, 10 banks earn 166.16 billion naira in fees, commissions. E-payment deals increased by 17.93% to 34.67 trillion naira. The details are on page 3. And this might excite you, maybe, but we shouldn't get too excited just yet. Federal government to decentralize national grid to solve electricity challenges. It's on page 8. Remember, this call has been made for quite a while now. Why don't we decentralize the national grid so that everywhere is not in total darkness when there is a grid collapse? Maybe they're beginning to think about that. Details will be on page 8 of the paper. There are a number of other stories, but we'll leave you to do the rest.
Right. Well, let's give you a feel of what to expect in the Nigerian News Direct today. This is what you find on the front page. Nance threatens to truncate presidential primaries, political activities in FCT, that's on ASU strike, as FG appeals to striking unions, universities to embrace dialogue. So that's a consistent one, and I hope that message has been passed across adequately. I have no personal grudge against anybody. Governor Abiodun, this concerns 2023 yet again, and of course, Eid al-Fitr. IGP orders adequate security, felicitates Muslim faithfuls nationwide. That's the front page of the NND.
Oh, okay. Sounded like a political party.
That's a new one, right? It's Nigerian News Direct.
The Vanguard newspaper has on its front page 2023 presidency. Anger as APC, PDP mull ceding tickets to North. That's what you have on the front page. You'll be wondering, where is that coming from? Is that anticipatory? I don't know. But let the writers speak. MBF Afenifere Pandef, Ohaneze, Adebanjo, Amechi, Ipon went speak. We will work against PDP, APC, any party that zones its tickets to North. That's according to MBF. MBF is Middle Belt Forum, just to be clear. It'll fly against the spirit of equity, justice, ascribed to Afeni Ferry. It may lead to Nigeria's disintegration, Adebanjo says. Northern elders fiddling while Nigeria burns, ascribed to Ohaneze. Find the story, all of it, on page 5. And in the box, in that story, you find consumer goods. Inflation triggers 40% jump in raw materials costs. Firms transfer increase to consumers. I wonder when we will really realize that, look, the quantum of things that we export, we can actually, if we had a Ajaokuta steel rolling mill working, for God's sake, the quantum of
the things
money,
we import, right?
Yes, the quantum of money that we will stop importing, I just can't imagine.
Well, looks like
I could see the joy in your face, like
you think the money will come into my pockets, right?
No.
The way I'm smiling.
Because I mean, it'll help so much. But anyway, I don't know. Right under that one, varsity unions strike. Only dialogue can resolve disagreements. Find that story on the front page. Is subscribed to the federal government. The story is on page 8. On the back page of sports, Raw sure of becoming Eagles' next head coach. But that's that. And then Mr. and Mrs. Something to lighten you up. Mrs. talking to Mr. who is backing him. I know I'm married to a lawyer, so it'll be difficult for me to tell you lies. And Mr. still backing Mrs. says, no, go ahead. Lawyers don't discourage liars.
Oh, wow. Shots fired this morning. Well, that's it with a look at the dailies this morning. Well, we'll go on a break now. And when we return, we'll get into the big topic of the day. There's dignity in labor, right? And no country can develop without the contribution of labor. But how well are we doing in that area? Grab a cup of coffee, whatever works for you. I'll be back with this one. Stay with us.
Various labor unions are flying their colors at the Eagle Square as they remember the sacrifices made by Nigerian workers towards national development. This year, Nigeria's labor unions are harping on labor, politics, and the quest for good governance. And the speeches at this event reflect just that. Beginning with the Minister of Labour and Employment, who's been in the crosshairs with members of the Academic Staff Union of Universities after failing to resolve issues leading to the shutdown of universities in the country. He emphasizes the need for mutual respect between Labour and the government, asking Labour to leverage on its large figures in the next elections.
100 million voters is no joke. So please harvest this. Let us get the PVCs done, so that Labour can dictate the way of governance of their country.
The speech from the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress highlights the challenges faced by workers in Nigeria. He has very strong words for Nigeria's political class.
It is only a fair political class that will keep citizens concerned and issues of national development as footnotes in 2023 political agenda.
For the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the strike action embarked upon by the Academic Staff Union of Universities is one that is close to his heart. He calls for more dialogue between both parties.
I want to appeal again to the Academic Staff Union of Universities and the broader labor community to seek the path of dialogue. Disagreement and debate have always been a part of the relationship between labor and government. But even as we disagree today, we must not do so as mortal adversaries, but as members of the same progressive family.
The working man is Nigeria's hero, and that's what May the 1st affords the Nigerian government and its people an opportunity to assess the challenges facing the working man and see his contributions towards national development. The Vice President in his speech talking about the correlation between labor and progressive thought, compelling labor unions not to treat government as mortal enemies, but argue with them as part of one family trying to move the nation forward. He's also promising that the challenges facing Nigeria's working man will be addressed in the nearest future. From Eagle Square in Abuja, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Oh, yes, indeed. I did say Happy Workers' Day, even though the celebration was yesterday. But you didn't think we were going to miss that, did you? Well, not certainly, because we also are workers. And I did say that one of the privileges on this job is being able to discuss issues that also directly affect you. By you, I also mean me. This morning, we have the pleasure of hosting on our program Onyekon Olasonye, who's the second national deputy president of the Trade Union Congress, that's TUC, and also the national president of the Association of Senior Staff of Banks, Insurance and Financial Institutions. Ma'am, you're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Happy Workers' Day to you.
Thank you.
Well, yesterday was quite a remarkable day. In many states, this was celebrated. Workers' Day was celebrated despite the fact that it was a Sunday and many people, of course, had to go to church. There's always a religious, let's say, obligation to be met on Sunday. Nonetheless, people showed their commitment to the Workers' Day by going to the stadium. And here in Abuja, it was at the Eagle Square. I imagine that you were at the Eagle Square here in Abuja.
Yes.
And of course, the mood in recent times has been a bit tense between government and labor. Maybe last year it was a bit better, but this year, this has come in the middle of ASU strike. What would you say was at the topmost agenda for labor when this year's Workers' Day was approaching?
Thank you. Yes, we know that Nigeria is a very religious country, and yesterday is one of the days for the Christian religion. But for Nigerian workers, it's one day out of 365 days that make the Workers' Day. So definitely we are at the Eagle Square. And a major concern this year is about good governance. Labor and politics. How can we influence the social development of the country and good governance? And that was what formed the theme of this year's topic, and that was our major concern. How we can influence now. Because over the year, we realized that we have a partnership with government that doesn't respect and think that we need a sort of a agreement on how to implement the development of the country. So this time around we think, and we said another election is coming, then we must be more influential in determining what will happen going forward in the country. And that was our major theme.
Interesting. Well, a few days before that, I do know that the NLC, which is, let's say an umbrella body for almost all workers, had a press conference where they said that, they were giving the federal government an ultimatum to intervene in ASU strike. Otherwise, the NLC itself will go on strike. I do not know if your union was a part of that. Was your union a part of that?
Thank you. You know, we have two labor centers in Nigeria, NSC and TUC. But if you recollect, precisely about 3 months ago, TUC also brought out a decision after a NEC meeting that we are going to join in solidarity strike with ASUS. So this time around, this strike is not about NSC or TUC. It's about all Nigerian workers coming to realize that the core foundation of the existence of Nigeria, which is education, is being gradually eroded. So we need to do something drastic about that.
Has there been any concrete response in that regard, to your knowledge?
None has been. If there has been, NLC will not come up again and said, we are going this way. There have been series of meetings between ASUS, NASU, and federal government, and there have never been any concrete result. If not, the universities will not be shut down as at present.
Well, the niceties have been done, the march pasts have been done, and the speeches have been given. And today is another day. Yes, it's a public holiday for the Eid celebrations. But one would imagine that moving forward from the ceremonies that happened yesterday, there should be something to work with moving forward. What is the expectation of Labour in this regard after the event of yesterday?
Thank you. For Labour, our expectation is that there should be a rapid and a balanced economic development for the country. And that has always been our motto before now. We realize that there should be a reduction, there should be a sort of reduction in the imbalance in income and the economic power of all Nigerians. We are not saying we want equal partner with everybody. I need to also put it to you that now when we talk about labor, now it's not only the worker. We are also talking about the informal sector, the lesser Nigerians, those that cannot feel themselves, those that have nothing to work about. Before Nigerians can have a new development, something we are all proud of, there should be improvement in production. We cannot be consuming what we are not producing. We cannot allow our consumption to be above what we are producing. And if we are not producing locally in the country, it will affect the forest demand, which we are not in control of. And the inflation will keep on going up. So our thinking and our march party yesterday is just like a call-up to ourselves to remember that this is the area we are thinking about. This is what we expect from the government. And that's the reason we are all, both TUC and LSC, forming a political commission that next year election, we want to have an impact in it.
Well, that certainly will wake up the politicians when you say that next year election, you form the political commission. The NLC president was quoted as saying that they promised 16 million block votes to parties that care about labor. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we're seeing, some governors now increase minimum wage. We don't know. I'm just, speculating. But there have been questions as to how seriously government has taken labor over the years. Would you say that the respect, the command of respect which labor used to have, that when labor opens his mouth, there is, I don't know how to put it now, but a certain seriousness, a weightiness attached to the issues that, labor brings to the table. Would you say that that is eroding, or would you say that labor still commands the sort of respect which it used to command back in the day?
Thank you. One thing I need to make clear is that being a worker, being labor, we are first Nigerian. And in all decisions we take, we first take interest and consider the interests of our fatherland. Maybe because we operate from that angle, Nigerians felt that we are becoming weak. We are not. Before now, labor think more about the welfare of their members. But we cannot continue thinking only of the welfare of our members in a situation we have found our country today. So because of that, we try to have a win-win. And that's the reason Nigerians felt that our power had been eroded. But we have realized that all shuttle of demands, all advice, everything we have discussed with the federal government concerning every aspect of the economic development, since they are not taking it into consideration, that's why we said, okay, this time around, we will not only discuss with somebody that will get there and we not remember what we have discussed. Let us have a sort of a shuttle of demands. This is what we request from anybody coming. And any political party that said, okay, we'll agree with this, we sign that, and we'll give them our block vote. Then if they are not implementing, it will be easier for us to say we have this deal. We have this deal. Unlike before when we don't have a real signed agreement and we couldn't say we have a block vote. So that is the area we are looking at this time. So it's not that we are not, it's not that we are weak or that we are not doing what it's supposed to do, but we consider the sensitivity and the all situation in the country, the security, everything. We felt that there should be a win-win approach to the way we take action this time around.
I want to look a little more specifically at your own union, the Association of Senior Staff of Banks, Insurance and Financial Institutions. This is one place where a lot of workers have complained, where they think that a lot of workers are currently holding the short end of the stick. There have been complaints of casualization in the banks. Working in the bank is not exactly as, I don't know what word I'm looking for right now, but the complaints of workers in banks in recent times have reached deafening proportions. But there have been questions as to how seriously their complaints are being taken. As president of this union, would you say that you have been able to get the ears of those who own the banks or the ears of the regulator, who should oversee the banks, or even the ear of the labor minister who should be concerned if workers are not getting, they are getting fairly treated in terms of how the banks operate?
Thank you so much. Let me start by saying that within the financial sector, the banks, insurance, and other financial sectors, because the law specified that in every sector there should be 3 unions, the union, the senior, and the employers themselves. There are 3 unions. But as Biffy is just one of it, there is no Biffy. But the saddening part of it is that there are more casual workers that doesn't belong to any of these unions in the banks. So most of the banks, we have over 75% people that are casual workers. And now the law regulating employment in Nigeria is not favorable to casual workers. I would say even that there is no law. And the little we can do, the implementation and the enforcement is not also there. So what we have done to date is that we have been able to meet with Ministry of Labor and that there's now a regulation put in place for the casual workers. We are thinking more that there should be career path for the casual workers. They are Nigerians. There should be dignity of labor for them. And their income should be something that is worth living. You know, when people talk about labor, that we are talking about minimum wage all the time, and that there should be more sacrifice from labor. They didn't consider 2 things, or 2 or 3 things. Number one is that the minimum wage, as at present, is something that is not allowing Nigerians to live at even the minimum living standard. We are not meeting the normal living standard. Number 2, there is no social security or welfareism in place. Number 3, it is still these same workers that are paying the tax that we needed to develop our country. You see that it's only employers and employees in Nigeria that pay adequate tax. We have so many institutions, so many organizations that are foreign corporate institutions that are not paying even the adequate tax. Even the politicians. What is the evidence that they are paying this tax? So as long as there are also policies in place that are not favorable to workers, and the workers are not treated as co-partners, we don't have the dignified labor in existence, then there is no way that the casual workers will be able to enjoy the benefit of being workers in Nigeria. So on this, we are working with the Ministry of Labor. We have been able to put in place a regulation that can protect them. We are more protected, but we are lesser than them. So if we are like 3 in this room, it's only 1 person that have the benefit of a collective agreement protection, and the remaining didn't have. It's of no value. So that is the problem with the financial sector. Yes, we have the support of Ministry of Labor, despite that the regulation have been in place, but it has not been turned to law because it still needs to go to FEC for ratification. But for the other regulators, we have not been having it as good as we want. It's like they concentrate more on profit making for our employers rather than for us workers to be able to have a win-win. Because when you keep on encouraging our employers to ask some of us to go to pay inadequate salaries, inadequate remuneration for the contract workers because they want to get more profit, and you are allowing them to gradually replace Nigerian workers with technologies, with robots, with so many technologies that are doing more of work, and they have been laid off in the banks, then we are increasing unemployment in the society. So government needs to come and have a win-win with both the profit making of our employers and the condition of Nigerians. You know that a single worker in Nigeria has over 20 dependents. So when you are gradually asking them to go and you are replacing them with technology, it will also affect the unemployment rate in Nigeria and also lead to the security situation we find ourselves.
It's a very complex issue because, I mean, it would seem that on the one hand, your numbers are being gradually eroded, of those who are allowed to unionize. On the other, there's very little you can do to protect those who are still working. They're known by another name, casual workers, but they're working, and they're working many times full-time.
Yeah.
And there's very little that you can do to protect them, even though you know, there is a union that exists in that particular sector. It's a rather complex issue. But it's a good thing to note that you are doing something on the side to see how it is that the law can actually, or the regulator, regulation can actually look after them. I know that, you know, we might not be able to exhaust all that we would like to talk about, so let me flip this conversation right now to Lagos, because I know that we have another guest on standby. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Maupa. We have with us Professor Akeem Akinwale, who is a professor of Employment Relations and Labor Studies at the Department of Employment Relations and Human Resource Management in Unilag. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Let me begin from something that Mrs. Olasoye just mentioned about the casual workers.
Okay.
In 2019, the same association said they had 65% of bank staff being casual workers. Now she says they are 75%.
Yeah.
Almost 80% in some cases, or some other stories that we hear. And the striking thing is that, according to her, they're not protected under any labor law. Is that a concern for you as a professor of employment?
It is a great concern. In fact, I've written about that. I conducted a study among contract employees in various banks, and their conditions are very appalling. And when you look at it, majority of them do not earn up to 100,000 naira per month. So the salary range is usually between 50,000 naira to 80,000 naira. So they come very early. They work for even more than 8 hours of work per day. So they close late for this amount. And when you look at the practical interpretation of the salary, you realize that what they earn is not up to 4,000 naira per day. So ordinary laborers in the informal economies who have never gone to school earn as much as 3,500 naira per day for working for like 3 to 4 hours. When you now compare that with the working conditions of these contract employees in banks, the situation is of great concern, both to me and this should be of great concern to all Nigerians.
You know, the financial sector, pardon me, is one of the most regulated in Nigeria. The regulation is big. So I wonder, because, I mean, this is also academic in some sense. There needs to be a lot of research, gather data, speak to those in authority. I wonder what you make of why this is happening. Because you'd expect, one, is very regulated. Two, there's a lot of money that flows in that sector. In fact, when people declare losses, you see most banks actually declaring profit. So it's not I imagine it's not a function of funds. So what exactly would you say is responsible? And it's not just banks, really. You have this across some other subsectors. So what have you found? I think it would be important to know.
Yeah, there is regulation, really. And the Apex Bank discourages the excessive use of contract employees in bank. And there is a period within which a contract employee should have been converted to full-time. So I also discovered that less than 10% have benefited from such opportunity to get converted from being a contract staff to being a full-time staff. And these contract staff usually come from a third-party employment agency. So what usually happens is that they usually get re-engaged in order to meet that regulation that specifies that the contract employment should not extend beyond certain period. So in that, you can see the reality is such that there's a kind of hidden, I'll call it a malpractice. On paper, it appears that, yes, there's compliance with this regulation. But in reality, because the same contract staff is now being seen to be a new employee. But these contract staff have always been there. But they usually get a kind of renewal of employment contract through a third-party employment relationship.
Is that to say that the regulator
Yes.
is turning a blind eye to this issue? Is that to say that the regulator is unaware of this breach? I mean, that you are in.
That's the way it seems. Okay. That's the way it seems.
So is that, my apologies, okay. Is that to say that the regulator is powerless to do anything about it? Or they're just condoning it as well?
Well, I think the contract employees themselves are not voicing out, really.
Would you voice out if it was you? You know, I mean, they are third-party,
yeah, at some
employees.
point, we really need to voice out, really, at some point, because the situation is not sustainable. What I discover is quite disturbing, really. And part of my recommendation is that they need to really unionize, because through unionism, the collective power of organized labor can be used as a strategy to get away from bondage or to get out of a frustrating, disturbing, dehumanizing employment situation.
Do you think the law would permit them to unionize?
There is a freedom of association, right to unionize, established by the International Labour Organization. Nigeria has ratified that. So under the Universal Bill of Rights, there is freedom of movement, freedom of expression, right to life. So, yes,
and if
by law.
Yeah, and if the company says unionize and lose your job, what happens?
There is protection under the law, basically, because if it can be established that they are being victimized for wanting to unionize, they can seek redress in a competent court of law. And such termination will be treated as wrongful dismissal, and they can sue for damages, really. So this is clear, and nobody can dispute this.
Well, there's so much to unpack, Professor. So let's take a short break, and when we return, we'll look at some other conditions of service, not just in banks, but everywhere else, as Kaudi has mentioned. Please stay with us. Professor Akinwale is still with us this morning. We're talking about the circumstances within which workers work in Nigeria and all of that, but perhaps a bit of background might help people to understand why this whole Labor Day thing is necessary and what impact it really does make.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. Labor Day is a commemoration of struggle by organized labor, and this struggle can be traced back to 136 years ago, especially what happened in the United States of America, when the organized labor, then led by American Federation of Labor, demanded for reduction in working hours from average of 13 to 14 hours to 8 hours of work per day. It was a serious struggle, because many employers of labor in the United States then were not ready. They were unwilling, and they strongly opposed to such demand. But it took the determination and resilience of most workers in the United States then to protest and demonstrate, and they were led by the Labor Center in the US, American Federation of Labor, and all the workers were mobilized, and eventually they took to the streets. They refused to go to work, and it was a serious struggle. A lot of lives were lost in the process. Many workers sustained injury. But at the end of the day, the government saw the need to intervene, and also employers of labor were mandated to accede to the demand of the organized labor then. So eventually, a law was formulated to reduce hours of work to 8 hours. And that's the base, that's the foundation of 8 hours of work per day, which has become global. So a struggle that started in the US is now of benefit to workers all over the world.
Pardon me, I was going to make that point about, so it used to be over 12 hours at that time.
Yes.
Now it's been reduced to 8 hours. But is it really 8 hours these days? Because with the advent of COVID came remote work. So there's hybrid work. So you do work at home and then you do work at work. But the essence is, have we really been able to reduce it to 8 hours? Is that still true today? Well,
that's the law. So, and employees have the right to operate within that framework. So, it's a commendable achievement. And even in some countries, the hours are being reviewed downward. In France, in Sweden, and some other countries, even in Germany, so the hours are even being reduced. So, some countries are even doing better, you know, by giving workers opportunity to enjoy what is called work-life balance. So, if in Nigeria, if employers are keeping their employees beyond 8 hours, the employees have the right to call the attention of the employer to, they don't need to be confrontational about it. It's about discussion. Because the employers cannot say no.
Yeah, it's one thing to...
And of course, there's also provision for overtime. You know, in case if maybe due to emergency or due to some reasons, if employers want employees to stay at work beyond the normal time.
I see you're smiling as you're making this point, but go ahead.
So there's provision for overtime. So employees can benefit what is called overtime pay.
Is that in public or private sector?
Both.
Okay, now, it's one thing for people to be at work. It's another thing to be as productive as they're expected. So
yes.
We're talking about Labor Day because we need to give attention to, I don't know if, you know, that's where kind of this question is going to go next, and I hope this is not a too far digression, but let's speak to the productivity of the labor force itself. You know, there are those, I mean, he inferred something, that today it's, with COVID comes hybrid work. Many people may not have the skills that they need to do the hybrid work, you know, Zoom meetings, WebEx meetings, Cisco meetings, and all those things on the one hand, and then the skills of being able to use those technology and stuff like that, and then the quality of work expected from the people who are doing this work, hybrid or not. Those questions are there. So what's your assessment of that in the light of Labor Day?
First, Nigerian workers should be commended for their active commitment to service, really, both in the private and public sector. I'm not talking of those employees who got their own job through the back door or through the patronage. So if we remove that and we focus on a normal work situation in which qualified personnel are recruited to get the job done. So the recruitment process usually takes into consideration competence, qualification, experience. And all of these play out when the employees adapt to the work situation by getting the job done. So now, situation warrants that, okay, people work from home because of a medical emergency. First, employers have responsibility to train their employees on how to work from home, do hybrid work, and also provide infrastructure that will enable the employees to deliver. So through regular training, the employee will have been accustomed to the new work method. And that is happening, really, especially in the private sector, right? So employees are being trained to adjust to the new reality, and they are excelling in that area. Also, in addition, employees also need to take responsibility to upgrade their skills in order to remain relevant because of the competition in the labor market. So if employees are slack or if they relax, they can be overtaken. They can be, so there could be some issues.
Okay, we're going to toss this to Abuja in a moment. But, that question I was asking about how we transition from over 12 hours to 8 hours, I think the fear now is why we've transitioned back to perhaps 12 hours because work is no more conventional, clock in, clock out. It's now a mixture of different things. You can always work from home, work at home, and, it's really blurred. The lines are blurred when it comes to that. But help us address this because earlier on you said workers can approach their employers and seek redress, maybe when it comes to overtime, hours of work, or, the condition of service. And you said that the employer will not say no. But we know that, really, if there's anything, most times they hear no. So how do Nigerian workers seek redress on varying issues? Where do they get help from? Do they have to take it up via the law? Do they have to deliberately join a union to seek redress? Do they have to approach their employers? Exactly how can workers get better service? How can they go about this?
When you say we, I wanted to ask you, who are you referring to? You said we are transiting to 12 hours from 8 hours, but I want to assume
general labor force.
I want to assume this problem is pronounced in the informal sector. It is the people in the informal sector that are not protected, that are not covered by these 8 hours of work per day, because the government law seems not to consider them as such, and they seem not to have enough clout or power to enjoy these benefits. So I think that is the area where we really need to get the problem solved. And currently, I'm happy to inform you that the organized labor in Nigeria is making serious attempts to unionize the workers' associations in the informal sector. And I'm in support of that, really. Because when informal workers are unionized, situation in the country will be transformed, really.
Will that also include casual workers?
Yes. Because casualization is a form of informality in the workplace. Because
informal work in a formal environment.
Yes, exactly. So if that happens, you can imagine what's going to happen. That is when the real collective power of organized labor will be in a full glare.
Okay,
really.
I'm wondering how the senior bank staff are going to react to that. Markwe?
Well, she's still here. I don't know. Do you think that that's something that will work?
Yes, thank you. It's something that will work. Because as at present, the same Ministry of Labor that regulates Labor Act is also the same, excuse me, institution that try to regulate the consultancy firm, the outsourcing firms that bring these casual workers into the labor center. The law specifies that there are some core functions in the banks that should not be casualized. But unfortunately, there's nobody implementing that. So as long as those people, and because of the unemployment level in Nigeria, somebody that has been out of work for years, by the time they get to a new work environment and they realize that between your collective rights as a worker and your daily income, the less than 100,000 we just speak about, they will be ready to forgo. Most of them sign all these things before they realize what is in it for them. They sign based on the desperation that for the first time I'm getting a job after maybe leaving the higher institution 2-3 years. So they accepted anything. And we have realized that some of these outsourcing companies, yes, the law specifies that you have the right to belong to any union, but they will tell them indirectly, not directly, that here we don't want you to belong. So even when the union is trying as much as possible to encourage them about their right at workplace, the fear of job loss is really affecting them. We have situation of people in some of these financial institutions running to our secretariat to complain about things. But the unfortunate thing is that even when we decide to take it up as Nigerian workers, because what we are doing now is that despite that they are casual workers, we are taking their case as workers. That is why we are including the informal sector to the union. But unfortunately, out of fear, I've seen a situation that somebody reported a case, a breach of right, and we took up the case with the institution and Ministry of Labor, and the person came out and said, we did not discuss anything like that. Nothing like this is happening. So all we are trying to do now is to bring out fear from all Nigerian workers, either casual or non-casual, and as long as we get there, trying to balance it up with the fact that it's the right that they have, I think there will be improvement. But I also need to say something. In respect to what the professor said in Lagos, that they can go to court. I want you to know that in the situation of the country, any case in court, we have cases in court from 2014. We have cases in court from 2006. So because of that, employer prefer us to take case to court because they know they have the liberty and the money and the means to drag the cases. But unfortunately, it's always easier and faster to go through industrial action and industrial relation. So when we expect Nigerians to go to court to say that I'm a breach of my constitutional rights, it's been affected in the workplace, but most of the time the fear of job loss, the fear of unemployment, and the fear of the duration of the case we take in court is also another thing we consider.
And that's something quite a number of employers are also aware of and maybe sometimes seek to exploit. I feel a little sad that we don't have a union representing workers in the government sector. But do you oftentimes feel a tension between workers who are in the government sector and workers who are in the private sector? Because you talked about minimum wage and how sometimes the talk of minimum wage directly also affects workers in the private sector, which is where you belong. Many times when we talk about minimum wage, the conversation is usually held within government context. For instance, we have seen the March pass now, and a new minimum wage announced in some states. In Lagos State, is about pensioners. In Edo State, is about workers in general. For a number of people, that should generally affect all the workers in Edo State, whether they be in the private sector or in the government sector. But does it really happen that way, or sometimes when those increments are announced at the state level, does it also extend to the private sector, or does it stop in the government circle?
Thank you. There are more union in the public sector even more than the private sector. And they have the population to take some decision and pull some weight around. Now coming to minimum wage, there is a National Wages Commission Board that speak about minimum wage and its effect on the private sector. Like, for example, currently, the minimum wage for the Federal Republic of Nigeria is 30,000. And the casual workers in the financial institution and in most places are being paid, let's say 65, 70, 80, 90, up to 100, which is technically above the minimum wage. But the consequential adjustments are not there for them because it seems as if you're already earning. That's why we said that for our sector, we are working about creating a career development plan for the casual workers. Like my colleague said, you notice that because the law says that after 2 years, in the labor law is 6 months, but in our sector we have been able to fight that it should be 2 years, that you must be employed, be given full employment. And since it is not the bank that are the direct employers of these people, the law permits an outsourcing company to employ the casual workers and take them to a bank. So at the end of 2 years, two things will happen. Either they give them a new letter of employment, or maybe the same outsourcing company is outsourcing for Bank A or for Bank B. So it will be willing to move you and start a fresh appointment in Bank B. So because of all those things, we have that issue that the increase in salary. So you will see somebody in the all contract workers, not only in the financial institutions now, that has worked for 10 years, but his letter of employment will be changed 2 years because they give such a person a new employment at every 2 years and the same salary. So that is why it is not felt in the private sector that there is a minimum wage for those that are casual workers, that we have not been able to create a career path for them. We are working on a situation that you may be a contract workers, because we find it tough that if we are insisting there should be no contract workers in Nigeria, we are delaying the process. So what we are doing now is that there may be, but they must earn a living wage, and there must be a career path for them. Let them be able to grow. Even if we call them casual 1, casual 2, casual 3, let there be an increase and a growth in career. So it's not that I've just worked 2 years and that I've worked 8 years, 2 years is being counted and there will be no experience to rely on. Let it be possible that, yes, I have spent 8 years in Bank A as a contract worker, so I have 8-year experience, so that when Bank B needs somebody of 8-year experience, even if you be a casual worker, you can easily flow into that thing. That's what we are working on now.
Well, I have many questions to ask you, ma'am. I was going to ask you about, because when we talk about productivity, sometimes there might also be that push and pull between the private and government sectors, especially when you look at the fact that a lot of regulation over the private sector comes from government sector, and it would seem that different rules apply depending on where you work. You know, some people seem to be enjoying, and some other people seem to be really, you know, bearing the brunt. But sadly, we're out of time. Hopefully, we'll be able to keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. And thank you for your work with the senior staff of the Association of Senior Staff of Banks, Insurance, and Financial Institutions. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you,
well, we've been speaking with Oyinkon Olasonye, who is the second National Deputy President of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, that's TUC, and also the National President of the Association of Senior Staff of Banks, Insurance, and Financial Institutions. That's it from this end. It's over now to you in Lagos.
Well, thank you, Mark. Well, Prof, last minute now on this matter. For you, as we close, what are those issues that are critical to labor that employers need to give priority to?
I will say welfare and job security. So workers should not lose their job. Workers should...
What is it that puts their jobs at risk?
Pardon?
What is it that puts their jobs at risk?
If pay is inadequate, that is risky, because it will affect their emotion, it will affect their temperament, it will affect their ability to cope with basic needs. Okay. And the question you ask can easily be answered, because we have solution in Nigeria. We should go back to our records. Since 1964, ILO has been working with Nigerian government. In 1980, there was JASPA, Job and Skill Program for Africa. Nigerian government then subscribed to that. And a report came out. That report said, first thing first. What is that first thing first? Meeting the basic need of people of Nigeria. 10 years after, in the 1990s, especially in 1996, ILO mission work with government officials and stakeholders, and they arrive at National Employment Policy. That document is still there. So this document is comprehensive. It
answers all of my questions.
It collaborated with Industrial Training Fund. Okay. It collaborated with National Wages, Income and Salaries, National Salaries, Incomes and Wages Commission, and other government parastatals in charge of improving working conditions of Nigerian workers. Okay. So we need to check our record and implement these important recommendations that can improve the life of workers in Nigeria. The pay must be adequate. National minimum wage is insufficient. If you look at it in practical terms, well, I need to say this, please. 1 second. Yeah. 30,000 naira is 1,500 naira per day. Look at it. So look at cost of living, cost of transportation. Okay. Even if you double it, it's not sufficient to live a decent life in anywhere in Nigeria. So we need to look into that. Well, then job security is key. People must have rest of mind that I cannot lose my job. Yeah. I can express myself freely. Fundamental rights of workers should be respected.
Well, again, as Mark also said, we run completely out of time. I would have wanted to ask you, what are those working conditions that need to be improved upon? But maybe some other time we have to take that on. Professor Akim Akinwale, Professor of Employment Relations and Labor Studies at UNILAG. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're welcome.
Well, we have been talking about leadership for a bit. We'll talk a little more after now. Stay with us. Looking at the title of this conversation we're about to have, you'll be wondering, okay, exactly what does that mean? Becoming president, a citizen's guide. I'm not the one that's going to answer that question. That question is from Magnus Oyimbe, who joins us here in our studio. He's an entrepreneur, public policy analyst, and development strategist. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, why would you name a book Becoming President of Nigeria a Citizen's Guide? I mean, it looks like, what, I call it textbook now for how to be president of Nigeria.
Exactly. That's how a lot of people are misconstruing it. They think it's like a manual, like a how-to book. Like when you buy a television set, that you have the manual inside, it tells you how to set it up and all that and all that. That's not exactly what it is. Somebody reviewed it recently, Dr. Chidi Amucha, and actually, pointed out all this, that the book is far deeper than that. And it is. Actually, I went into the origins of Nigeria from when the British amalgamated the provinces, the northern and southern protectorate for business reasons, for economic reasons, and Nigeria became. Then, after a lot of evolution, we're where we are right now. When Nigeria evolved, first of all, it was much easier because there were unifying factors, like trade, for instance. Nigerians were trading between each other. The northern side was trading with the southern side. So there was a lot of interactions. The northern side was trading in cattle, and they were going all the way from Kano and the rest of the north to Enugu. I actually followed the trade when I used to be a broadcaster with NTA. I was doing Newsline. So I was intrigued by how they managed, because it's not all of the cattle dealers or traders or herders that trekked all the way from the north. Some actually went by other means. But I followed the trail from Kano all the way to Enugu, where I met a certain Musa who spoke Igbo without Hausa inflections perfectly. He was born there. His children were growing up there. They were, by all means, all estimation, looking like Igbo people. But they were from the north. They were from Kano, they were from Katsina and Sokoto and all that. But they had gotten acculturated. They are acculturized. They have become used to the place. And they were coping. They were doing well. And there were also Southerners, people from the southwest, people from the east, who were also going to the north to trade. The southwest were selling, the southwest people, like the Yoruba people, for instance, were selling kola nuts. And of course, you know the story of the kola nut. It's one of the unifying items for Nigeria. The Yorubas grow it, the Igbos eat it, speak about it the most, the Hausas eat it the most. So it was one thing uniting us and whatever. So trade was going on. The Igbo people were going there to be artisans. They were, bricklayers. They were auto spare parts dealers. They were pharmacy operators and stuff like that. So there was interaction, and there was no problem. But I think over the years, these tensions arose.
Perhaps it might be good, if it is possible, to drop a pin on the point at which those disagreements began to arise, because I've seen, a statement put out on your behalf talking about those the things that you listed in the book, which the Vice President has often called our fault lines, and a number of other people have also called our fault lines, religious differences, ethnic differences, and all those things. So at what point, if, can I ask if the book dropped a pin on, at what point those differences, if I can use the term, began to be an issue? They weren't issues before.
Yes, it actually arose from politics. It's politics that created it. I have 12 chapters in the book, and each of them, detailed issues and crisis points.
I don't want you to give spoilers to the book, but if you say politics, from when? Because we've had politics from pre-independence. We've had, this is the fourth republic that we're in now. So at what point did this politics?
Okay, you see, after independence, there was a coup, right? In 1966. The coup took on ethnic coloration when they termed the coup Igbo coup, because it was led by Nzogo. Okay? Now, there was a counter coup 6 months after, in July. The first coup was January 66. Then there was a counter coup in July of 66. Then there was a war. Biafra state was declared by the governor of Eastern Region at that time, Ojukwu. There was a war. War ended in 1970, and the military took over. The tension did not stop. The crisis continued until 79. There was return to democracy. So, this time, it was presidential system.
My apologies. The war ended. The government of the day at the time said, no victor, no vanquished. And the tagline then was, to keep Nigeria one is a task that must be done. So couldn't that issue of these differences that you talked about have been raised and addressed at the time?
They did not pursue it. In fact, there was 3 R's: reconstruction, reconciliation, and some R, a third R, was supposed to have been pursued. It was introduced by General Gawan, but unfortunately, we did not go through with it like they did in South Africa, Truth and Reconciliation Committee, like they did in Rwanda, which made the people come face to face and in terms with the reality. We did not do that. We pushed them under the carpet, and that's what has created a mound that we're tripping over continuously.
But isn't it also disturbing that the attempt to ensure that doesn't come this far was with the introduction of the National Youth Service Corps by that same, government at the time. Now, look, we've had a war. Can we find a way to build our future by ensuring that our young people always come together through the National Youth Service Corps?
Yes, that was cosmetic. It wasn't deep enough. It was, that's a byproduct. It should have been part of the whole thing. But the first thing would have been that we should have confronted each other, tell each other the truth. We should have reconciled. But we didn't do that. There was no reconciliation. So they just tossed it under the carpet and thought it would go away. And it has refused to go away.
So reconstruction, rehabilitation.
Yes.
I think that's the R you were looking for.
Yes.
Clearly, the title of the book is catchy, I must tell you, both for someone who wants to become president, because it says clearly, becoming president of Nigeria, a citizen's guide. And, seeing the title, I was thinking, is this for someone who wants to become the president, or for Nigerians to know what kind of qualities to look out for in the leaders they will recruit in the coming cycle, or just a general book that talks about, as you said, history and some of the issues we have come to face as Nigeria? But I can't rule out the fact that it says becoming president of Nigeria. And how easy will that be? Because it's a citizen's guide, not a professional politician's guide.
Absolutely.
How easy will that be when you have to, for example, eke out between 40 million, and I want to actually talk about this one on the one hand, when you have to eke out between 40 to 100 million naira just to purchase forms, and I'm not even talking about the campaigns, the consultations, and all of that. How easy really is it in the light of all of these, some would say, encumbrances?
It's really terrible. Actually, a colleague of ours, Chris Obusi, the owner of some radio stations, actually, when I was having a conversation with him, mentioned to me, or retorted when I told him what the purpose of this book was, that is to enlighten Nigerians and give them hope that anybody can become president of Nigeria based on the Constitution of Nigeria. Your age and stuff like that, and your educational qualification, which is minimum, whatever, and stuff like that. And he said no. So I said, listen, out of the 5 people who have been presidents of Nigeria since independence, 3 have been teachers, ordinary school teachers, like that they used to say their reward is in heaven. And the other 2 have been soldiers, as they say, bloody soldiers. So it's not, we have a democracy, it's not an aristocracy, it's not an oligarchy, it's not a monarchy. So everybody, anybody could become president of Nigeria if you really aspire to becoming president of Nigeria. But when I was writing this book, the amount of money required for you to purchase nomination form was for the APC 15 million naira. And I remember in 2015, when the incumbent president, Buhari, had to pay 15 million naira for his ticket, he was furious. He was shouting blue murder, that why would that be? But unfortunately, 8 years after, it's 100 million. So it now makes, it has created a kind of impression, contrary to the impression I was trying to create, that anybody can become president of Nigeria. If it's so prohibitive to procure a nomination form, then it's not for anybody or for everybody. 100 million is a lot of money, I agree with you. 40 million is a lot of money. I already complained that 40 million that was set by the PDP was too much, and I was complaining that a friend of mine, like Dele Momodu, who has not been in public office, or Showore and co., would be skimmed out, because they may not be able to raise that kind of funds, but for one reason or the other, they've been able to do so. So it's unfortunate that that is the situation. But the whole point about writing this book is to enlighten Nigerians about what Nigeria is about and create hope in them that they can aspire to become president, and it can happen because the examples I cited, ordinary people have become presidents.
Just before Malkwe comes in from Abuja, I'd like to tie this back to the point you were making earlier. So this is essentially our recruitment process, the politics, the whole politic. And you said that this is what was responsible for, exposing our fault lines. I'm still waiting for that point, really, when politics started playing a major role in exposing our fault lines, perhaps in our history, if we can put our fingers on it. But in your book, or in the preamble, you talked about the entity Nigeria, and that's a term I've heard a lot. And I imagine it's meant to make a point, the entity Nigeria, not maybe the nation Nigeria, but it's always said the entity Nigeria. So is that a point that you're trying to pass across? How should we approach Nigeria, really?
We're still not a nation yet, unfortunately. We're still chasing nationhood. And a lot of erudite authorities, have spoken about it, from Shoyinka to so many of them have spoken about Nigeria not being a nation. We're still disparate. We're still ethnic nationalities that have not actually come together. We can, because we're not so much different from England. If you remember, the UK, has 4 major ethnic groups. The Irish, the Scots, and there are 4 of them. There's no need to go into all the details. Switzerland, same thing, whatever, and stuff like that. But we have refused to blend. The fault line that you were speaking about earlier arose from religion, or is being, built on through religion. First of all, it started after the war. Don't forget that there was an Atine who was a politician and chairman of a council in Enugu many years ago. Hausa man from Sokoto. Don't forget that there's a village in Kano State, now a big town, where Rabiu Kwakwanso comes from. It was started by an Igbo trader, Okonkwo and Sons. Before it was being pronounced with Hausa inflection, it became Kwakwanso. Yes, it's Okonkwo and Sons. So there was integration.
That's a very interesting one.
People from both sides were living together. They were integrating. They had those ethnic differences. One part was from the Sahel and the Islamic. Another part was from the mangrove, you know, and stuff like that, and Christians. But they interrelated with each other. Just like we said, the people from UK are doing. The Welsh are different from the Scots. So there was opportunity, there was platform for us to cooperate. You know, but I don't know how religion has become such a serious issue that we are so divided.
By the way, that point you made about the town in Kano, that area,
yes,
is this recorded, by the way?
Of course, it's in history. Musa Kwakwanso, Dr. Musa Kwakwanso, two-time governor of Kano State, is from Okonkwo and Sons, originally, the town called Okonkwo and Sons, that has developed into an urban center right now. That's where he's from. It's on record. Atine was a legislator of Igbo origin, of Hausa origin in Enugu. He defeated Igbo people in Enugu.
I'm enjoying these history lessons. Of course, I'll go back to,
yes,
to take a look at
yes.
them. But let's toss this to Mankwe, because I know she's itching to come into this conversation. Mankwe.
Well, I have to say, very interesting title to your book, sir. It's I've only read reviews of it. I haven't seen the details of the book. But I'm wondering, I mean, if you were to look at what you have written so far, and I do not know if this is correlated with what is currently happening, even though I know that the timing of the release of the book is also quite auspicious. From all the people you have seen declaring right now, who do you really think stands a chance as an ordinary Nigerian? And this is very difficult because you might argue that a lot of people who have declared right now are the typical politicians. But who would you say are ordinary Nigerians who have just decided to throw their hat in the ring to see what could come of it? Do you really hold out a candle for any single one of them, whom you perceive as ordinary?
Unfortunately, you know, I can't really identify any one of them as ordinary, in light of the fact that 40 million naira and 100 million naira can't be raised by an ordinary Nigerian. No matter how they try to spin it, that these monies are raised by communities and a group of friends and stuff like that, we know that, you know, that's not the case. So you really have to be somebody of means to be able to raise that kind of money to purchase nomination forms. So there are no ordinary Nigerians, you know, getting into it, unfortunately. And that was not the case when the people I mentioned earlier, like Shehu Shagari and Umar Yar'Adua and Goodluck Jonathan, who got in there by default, you know, went through when they were doing that. You know, so it's so, I don't know how to put it, you know, that it's so difficult to be able to put my finger on any ordinary Nigerian who is vying for that post right now.
But what that means is that you have also excluded the other political parties. It will seem that you have limited the chances of any Nigerian who is serious about becoming president to being members of the two major political parties. Otherwise, they really don't stand a chance, do they?
Yeah, that's the reality, really. You know, politics is actually not for the faint-hearted. It's actually not also a tea party. It's a very difficult thing. For you to be able to make any impact, you have to belong to a major platform. That's the sympathy I have for people like Kingsley Moghalu, who could have had a chance, or others who have not joined the main political parties, PDP or APC. And it's not peculiar to Nigeria. In the United States of America, if Trump did not join the Republican Party, he wouldn't have made the impact that he made. And if you recall, somebody like Ross Perot, he tried as an independent candidate over a very long time, and he didn't succeed. Bloomberg tried to come in, you know, with all his billions and all that. He didn't go far. So platforms matter, and because the platforms have structures spread across all the local government areas, all the wards and stuff like that, and whatever that you need to be able to carry you along. If you don't have such, you're not going to go far. So when, you know, I'm talking about becoming president of Nigeria, I'm actually talking about people who are going to be bidding for the job on the platforms of the two main political parties, the APC and PDP for now.
Not unfair then when you say that you do not, I mean, they don't qualify to be president or to be ordinary, to be termed ordinary, if they can afford a 100 million naira form or a 40 million naira form. On the other hand, if you had 100 million naira in a fringe party, the chances that you'll even, you know, you might make the primaries of your party, but the chances that your votes will go beyond Abuja or your state of origin will be very slim. So isn't that quite an unfair assessment, so to speak? Because some people will say, well, I could still be ordinary. Let me give you the instance of someone whom we know has freshly come from the private sector. I'm trying to remember his name now. He's the chairman of, used to be chairman of Namath. Mazi Sam Ohabua, for instance.
Okay,
yeah,
Mazi Sam Ohabua, yes.
I do not know what sort of chance you give someone like that who we know has not held any public office in that sense. Well, he's been chairman of Pharmaceutical Organization of Nigeria, but I mean, beyond what obtains in the private sector, he doesn't really have much of a leg in politics, as we know. What would you say the chances of someone like that? And I really hate to pinpoint him, but I mean, you cannot say he's someone who doesn't have means. He certainly has some means, but you know, we also know that he's a pretty greenhorn in the political sphere. Maybe not new to Nigerian politics, but in terms of throwing his hat into the ring, he hasn't. I'm taking great pains to explain why I'm picking him. But what do you think the chances of? I mean, I think you also mentioned Mr. Dele Momodu as well. What would you say their chances are in picking forms within their they picked up the forms at the primaries of parties who oftentimes prefer to have a consensus arrangement?
Yes, indeed, I've had a dialogue about this with Bashir Dele Momodu, who's my friend. I actually gifted him a copy of the book, and he has also internalized the fact that the point that it's difficult for people like them, but I said it has to be incremental, that if they try again next time, they'll build it up. Even those in active politics, it's even difficult for them to make the presidency if they have not been able to build their tentacles across Nigeria. That's why I'm even saying it's even challenging for, even as we are clamoring, or people are clamoring for the presidency to go to the East, you're even saying, who is the person from the East who has the clout? There has to be a clout for you to be president of Nigeria. Let's take, for instance, President Olusegun Obasanjo became president because he was an head of state. The same thing for PMB, he helped them. As for Jonathan, he was vice president to Umar Yar'Adua. Umar Yar'Adua also rode on the back of his brother, who was chief of staff, Shehu, and also his father, who was a minister. Shehu Shagari was a minister in the Second Republic. He took over the job of late Obafemi Awolowo, actually, after he was jailed. So all these people had played a role nationally before they got to becoming the president of Nigeria. So it's not easy for anybody to just come out from anywhere and become president of Nigeria. It's not possible. MK Abiola, who made a very good attempt, he's the only aristocrat that had attempted to become president of Nigeria, had actually established himself as a national figure through sports, through his newspaper, through his philanthropy and everything and whatever. So it's not just an ordinary person that just comes. You have to build on it. You have to work on it over a very long time before you can become president of Nigeria. And these individuals, as you just mentioned, Mazi Sam Ohabunwa and probably Mr. Hayatuddin, you know, who are like rookies, just getting into it, it will be difficult for them. I think even people like Omoyele Sowore and Dele Momodu have better chance than these people because they have been in the system and they have been building up and their names are recognized as household names nationwide. But these people are just jumping into the fray.
But doesn't that fly straight in the face of the argument that you're saying that anybody can become president of Nigeria?
I said if you work hard for it. I didn't say you can just come and just jump into it and become a president of Nigeria. No, you have to work for it. It's incremental. You have to build on a block over a period of time.
But you also talked about certain privileges that a number of these people have had. I mean, Shagari riding on the back of someone, Umar Yar'Adua riding on the back of someone, the two former heads of states who became presidents, you know, riding on the back of their pedigree in the military and all of that. So not everyone Nigerian will be able to do that.
Yes, I also said so, you know, and pointed out that for you to become president of Nigeria, that you have to be popular. It's a popularity contest. And I said even in the United States of America, that, you know, a wrestler became a governor in Michigan. And an actor in the movies, Ronald Reagan, became president. And Schwarzenegger, a bodybuilder, became a governor. Even in Ukraine right now, Zelensky was a reality TV show actor. Okay. As a matter of fact...
You didn't say comedian.
Yes.
People most times say comedian.
Well, I have to be fair. Well, you know, even a couple of days ago, President Biden, in addressing the media, the forum that they had recently, had to make a joke that becoming president of America is not a comedy show. Okay? You know, so it's a popularity contest. You know?
Perhaps this is why it's important to grab a copy of the book. It's not out yet, is it?
It is out.
Okay,
Yeah, it is.
So you can grab a copy of it.
Yes.
I wanted to make this point as we wind down in about a minute or so. Zoning. We've talked consensus a little bit, touched on it, but zoning is also big this time around. Let's do like maybe a short appraisal of it. Has it really favored us as a country, zoning?
No.
And should we be doing that now?
No, actually, I said zoning is creating zero-sum politics in Nigeria. You have to read the book. It's there. That zoning is creating zero-sum politics. Zero-sum politics means like when the Yoruba people are in charge, they put all their people, they build castles and everything and whatever with all their people backing them up, like Obasanjo's 8 years. Then he leaves. Then the Hausa takes over. The Hausa builds all his castle, okay, and stuff like that and whatever. And he leaves. Then the Igbo man comes and levels it. So we keep going back to ground zero instead of growing incrementally. So that has not helped. This book is going to be launched on the 10th of this month at Yar'Adua Center in Abuja, 10 a.m. And there's a panel of gentlemen like you, 4, each representing the 3 ethnic groups that we have in Nigeria. And they're going to talk about what we expect from the president of Nigeria 2023, the characteristics, the worldview. You know, we're going to set the agenda because as you were saying earlier, we should have by now started talking about the agendas of the presidential candidates. We should start seeing their manifestos. But we're not saying that. All we have been occupied with is rotation, consensus, direct, indirect, and stuff like that. We believe that, you know, hopefully by the time the primaries are done, they will get to the business of the day.
Well, there are so many things to take you on concerning this conversation. Well, let me say this is a conversation starter. We'll have to sustain this some of the time. We have to thank you at this moment for being here. Magnus Onyibe is an entrepreneur and public policy analyst, author, Becoming President of Nigeria, A Citizen's Guide, and so many other things, so many other feathers to his cap. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me
this morning.
Thank you.
Just before we go, that content?
Oh, yes. So it's a conversation starter we just had, but this one we're taking is a conversation ender, as it were. And they're your comments and messages. Let's start with this email from Dr. Peter Diallo on the plight of the Nigerian workers, saying it's high time that the entire workforce is unionized, irrespective of the category they belong. They need to leverage on new Pengusan unionism. Otherwise, our workers in the private sector, especially in manufacturing, will continue to remain in a state of neglect, humiliation, and strangulation by their Shylock employers, he says.
Oh, dear. Pastor Law Alpha says, the story readily to be told by a Nigerian worker is of pain, disappointment, regret, and hopelessness, particularly at the state's level, where workers are ruled with impunity by governors.
Comrade Dare says Nigerian workers, especially most of them in private sector, are suffering. There's a lack of unifying force of laws to ensure rights of private sector workers. Most private sector wages and working conditions in Nigeria are not encouraging.
Well, this tweet is from Festus Akimboyewa, still on the labor matter, saying, with the high cost of living in Nigeria, no doubt life is tough for Nigerian workers. That's why productivity is low. Government at all levels must invest in digital skills, inclusion, and technology to improve the productivity of Nigerian workers.
Professor Enakina says it's time state and federal governments in conjunction with labor to look to enact policies that will decasualize workers in the financial institutions, oil and gas industries and other companies manipulating employment by sacking and re-employing workers due for permanent employment.
An Israel auditor says what's the real reason for the incessant collapse of buildings in Lagos? Apart from building malpractices, could there be other reasons? Could something be wrong with the topography? If this is so, building in Lagos might require special prerequisites. Well, that's That's all we can take this beautiful Monday morning, which is also Eid celebration and a holiday here in Nigeria. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for sending in your tweets. I'm Maokwe Obin Yusuf.
Yes, happy Eid al-Fitr. I know this is another one where there's meat largesse, so we'll wait for that one. But do have a fantastic day ahead. I'm Kayode Okikilu.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.